You're listening to or watching the QC Step Podcast, a podcast to give you the information and the skills that you need to find a job, keep that job, and become a valuable employee. My name is Corey Finneran, and welcome to the 19th episode of the QC Step Podcast. On this week's episode, we'll continue our discussion on how to prepare yourselves for a job fair or a career fair, and I'll talk with you about how to sell yourself when speaking with an employer. But first, let's take a look at this week's job leads. These job leads are posted every Monday morning at qcstep.com, and there's the links to the online applications for some of them. We'll start things off here. Gap at North Park Mall, they're hiring sales associates, and there's a link on our site to the online application. Panera Bread in Moline, they're hiring all positions, and there's a link to the online application. Like most online applications, this one's pretty long. It'll probably take you 45 minutes or so. But if you do apply for Panera, please let Gary or Cari know, or you can email me at info@qcstep.com. I've spoken with their HR manager before, and one of us can go in and talk with them about your application. Last week we had a Whitewater Junction opening, and we have a different one this week. This week it's a slide attendant, and you have to be 16 years old to apply for this. And there's the link to the online application on our site. Olive Garden in Davenport, they're looking for host/hostess, and there's the link to the online application on our site. And Bethel Wesley United Methodist Church, and that's in Moline. They are looking for a custodian, and the phone number to call them is 309-764-0619, and you need to call Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And Steak and Shake is looking for grill associates, and you can apply in person. And that's the Steak and Shake that's by Walmart in Moline. And then we have a couple job leads for our graduates. It didn't say the employer, but it's a dock worker position. And so I'm not real sure what company it's with. But there's a link to the online application on our site. And then Coca-Cola is looking for warehouse workers, and there's the link to the online application there. If you would like information on any of these job leads, or if you'd like help filling out the applications, you can fill out the contact form that's at the bottom of this post on qcstep.com, and Gary Maiden or Cari Stewart will meet with you. The 2013 Career Fair for People with Disabilities is coming up on March 4th at the iWireless Center. And we're continuing our discussion today on how to prepare yourselves for this or any career fair or job fair. In episode number 17, I spoke with you about how you should dress for a job fair. In episode number 18, I spoke with you about how to introduce yourself and start a conversation with employers at job fairs. And if you missed either one of those, you can go back and listen or watch the episodes. So once you started the conversation with an employer at a job fair, at some point, greetings and introductions are going to end, and you need to sell yourself. And what I mean by that is you need to convince the employer that he or she should consider you for an opening. So I'm going to go over a few things that you can do to sell yourself, or a few things that you can sell about yourself. Number 1, experience. Do you have any work experience, either paid or volunteer? And if you do, sell that experience. Tell the employer what your responsibilities were. Tell them what you were good at. If you liked working with customers, mention that, because every employer will value that. Did you have great attendance at your work, or were you never late? Those are very important to employers too. Use words like reliable, punctual, responsible. Were you willing to work extra shifts or stay later than you were scheduled? These are all things that show a potential employer your flexibility and your desire to work hard for that employer. The second thing that you can sell kind of goes along with that, volunteer work. You might think that volunteer work isn't worth mentioning because it wasn't real work, but volunteer work is very important to bring up. What it says a lot about your work ethic and the fact that you didn't care whether or not you were being paid for it. And it shows that you care about your community and that you're willing to give your time. So volunteer work is very admirable and employers value it. I will tell you that. In going back to an interview, I think it was maybe with McDonald's or with the HR manager at Hy-Vee. I can't remember which one it was with, but they talked about how important it is if people have volunteered in the past, that kind of gives them a leg up and it kind of gives you an advantage over someone that hasn't done any volunteer work. The third thing that you can sell is school. Maybe you haven't worked because you focused on school and you have the good grades to show for it or good attendance. Are you involved with any clubs or extracurricular activities? Maybe you work in the library, or you run passes during your study hall, or something like that. These are all things that show that other people have found you to be responsible. Also, if you're in a work class, step class, or co-op, this shows employers that work is important to you. So if you are in step class, mention that you're in the school's work program. Now, while you're selling yourself, it's important to have good eye contact. It's important to be to smile and to be confident in yourself. If you're at the career fair on March 4th and you'd like to practice introducing yourself or selling yourself and your abilities and your experiences, feel free to come up to any of the staff members from QC Step, Dawn, myself, Carrie, Gary, or Cindy, and we would be happy to let you practice on us, and we can give you some tips with what you show us. If you have any questions about the job fair or the career fair, you can send them to me via Facebook or Twitter, or you can email them to me at info@qcstep.com. So that does it for the 19th episode of the QC Step podcast. I mentioned last week that once we get done with this job fair stuff, then we'll start bringing back the QCstep.com tips of the week and stuff like that. I hope that I provided you with information that's going to help you sell yourself at any job fair, career fair. And next week, I will be talking with you about how to wrap up a conversation, how to end a conversation. That can be a real difficult thing too. And so I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that and have it not feel like kind of an awkward ending of the conversation. If you want job leads, as soon as we get them, you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And don't forget that if you have any questions about a job fair or career fair, I can share them here on the podcast and answer any questions that you might have. Maybe you want to know specific questions on, well, this is my situation. How do I sell this? Don't hesitate to send those to me. I think other students would probably like hearing what the answers to those questions might be. And I won't use your name or anything like that, so don't worry about being embarrassed. But please don't hesitate to send them to me because I think other people would like to hear real life examples of how to sell yourself. And you can send those to me through our Facebook page or Twitter, or you can email them to me, info@qcstep.com. Again, we will be back next week, and we'll have another episode of the QC Step podcast.